Good morning. I'm just going to give a second here and make sure everything's going well. Anyone wants to hop on? Okay, so for those of you who are new here, I love to hop on and do member Q&As, especially if the information is going to be for the good of the group. So the question here is, I have all these symptoms and I'm heading to the doctor soon. What labs should I request? So this is a question I get asked a lot because, as most of you know, I am trained in advanced blood chemistry analysis. So this is a functional way of being trained to look at blood work. So I'm not necessarily taking the blood work and looking at pathology like a medical doctor would be, but I am looking at the blood work to identify patterns and deficiencies so that I can create a repair and nourishment protocol for you based off the data. So I do something called BioTrack analysis. So I take your blood work, I take symptoms, I take health history, I take a 30-minute call where I'm talking to you about how you would like to feel, and I put all that together and I create a protocol. And that can be found in my blood chemistry analysis session, which everyone in Rise Up has a discount to. It's a 20% discount. So I can get you more information on that for the readings of your blood work. And I'd like to work with blood work that's anywhere from 2 to 3 to 4 months old is still considered current. So a few things that I want to share with you. When you go and get your blood work tested, make sure that you have access to an online portal where you can download this information for yourself, or you get copies made so that you have it, because the comparison over time is where the real magic takes place so that we can see if certain protocols are working or not. So step number one, always, 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 no matter what tests you get, make sure you get a copy for your own files. The second thing that I have found that has been very helpful, especially with my thyroid clients, is that we like to go in and create almost like a, scientific experiment, I guess. So we want to control as many variables as possible. So if you are fasting and you're not taking any medication and you're going 9 a.m. To get your blood work done, try to do that every single time. Try to also be fasting. Try to also not be on any medication. Try to go at 9 a.m. the next time. That way we're controlling as many of those variables as possible so that we really can get a really healthy look of what's going on, especially with the patterns and if there's potential chronic illness there. Comparing that makes more sense if we are controlling as many of the variables as possible. And for those of you on thyroid medication, I do recommend getting your blood work done without the medication so that you can really test to see how well your thyroid is working itself, instead of testing how well the medication is working for you. If you have any more questions about that particularly, please let me know. So going back to the testing and what you need. When you go to the doctor, traditionally speaking, if you're going in for a physical, they're going to run a comprehensive metabolic panel, probably a complete blood count. They might throw a lipid count in there, which is great. But if we want to see whole system functioning, we need a little bit more. So I would say still go in and recommend and double check and make sure you're getting all of those things, because I find a lot when I look at the blood work, I have to use that blood work in relation to other pieces of the blood work, because I am making connections. I am looking for patterns. So it's still very important to go in and request a comprehensive metabolic panel. You definitely want to make sure they're doing the complete blood count. You want to make sure they are doing a lipid panel that will test your cholesterol and the different lipids in your system, because those are very much impacted and can impact thyroid health. You want a full thyroid panel, and I want to go over that specifically because traditional doctors and even endocrinologists will often, if you go in and you request a full thyroid panel and you just say that, they're just going to run your TSH and your free T4. So what belongs in a full thyroid panel is a little bit more extensive. Yes, we need the TSH. We need to make sure that our pituitary gland is communicating with our thyroid gland and that the hormones are actually being produced. So that is important. However, it doesn't tell us how much of the hormone is free and available in the body. It also doesn't tell us what the conversion rate looks like in the body. It doesn't tell us if your body is halting on thyroid production when it needs to. So a full thyroid panel would be a TSH, a free T4, a free T3, and if you don't know, the T4 and the T3 are the two hormones that are produced by your thyroid gland. We also need the total numbers of those. So we need a total T4 and a total T3. So right off the bat, that's already 5 different tests. I want you to add on the reverse T3. You'll have some places that might do like a T3 uptake. That's a little bit more of an archaic test, but it could still provide a little bit of information, but it's not necessary. So reverse T3, and then antibodies. Antibodies are kind of the missing piece of the puzzle here, and I don't know why they aren't being run more frequently, but a lot of times if you are dealing with very severe symptoms associated with hypothyroidism or hyperthyroidism, I highly recommend going in and getting antibodies run. People who, and that would indicate whether or not you have the autoimmune condition, right? So these two tests, there's a TPO, a TGAB, and then you can also request a TPI. So you want to make sure that the antibody tests are run, because if you come back and you have a high antibody number, and I've seen everything from 17 all the way up to the 800s. So that's different severities of an autoimmune condition, which means if you have hypothyroidism and you come back and you're like, they tested my antibodies and I have like my TPO came back and it was like a 220. Well, we're going to address your protocols more from an autoimmune condition standpoint than a thyroid health standpoint. Because if you don't get the autoimmune symptoms under control, we can't go in and do too much to the thyroid until we have inflammation down, until we have gut dysbiosis under control, which very heavily impacts autoimmune health. We want to go in and look at nutritional deficiencies to make sure that we can support the body while we're, dealing with the autoimmune condition. And once we have those symptoms suppressed, then we go back in 3 to 6 months, we get another round of blood work done. Then we see, because oftentimes what happens is if you approach Hashimoto's with an autoimmune protocol instead of, just a straight up thyroid protocol, that's going to impact the thyroid without you even directly doing so. We can go in, we can do more functional testing as well to make sure there aren't any other micronutrient deficiencies, neurotransmitters, to make sure, everything is firing on all cylinders when it's concerned with different nutrients that your brain needs for proper hormone functioning. So there's a lot that can cascade from a proper initial blood work request. So I know I spoke in between the full thyroid panel, so real quick, I'm just going to go over that again. It's a TSH, free T4, free T3, total T4, total T3, reverse T3, TPO, TGAB, TPI antibodies. Along with that, I want to make sure you're not anemic. I can't even tell you the number of times I have had people fill out a symptom checklist form and they have all of these symptoms that look like hypothyroidism, and then we run the blood work and I'm like, you're anemic, so let's get on some support there, and let's see what happens to these symptoms. And a lot of times the symptoms that someone would initially look at and be like, oh, those are low thyroid symptoms, are actually because you have low iron. And there's many different types of anemia, so we want to make sure that we run a full iron panel as well. So make sure you do get the iron serum looked at, make sure that you do get the ferritin levels run as well, because the ferritin is going to test the stored iron, which is probably one of the more important things for us to look at. And as far as other additional markers are concerned, we want to see if you're low in vitamin D. So you would request a vitamin D panel to be run, and those are separate markers. A vitamin B12 can often look like a lot of hormonal imbalances. Magnesium is important to run. Insulin, hemoglobin A1C, which, I see sometimes, someone will have normal glucose and someone will have normal insulin levels, but they'll have a high hemoglobin A1C, and that's an indication to me that we really need to go in and look hard at their diet to see what they're eating, because their hemoglobin, which is like the stored glycogen, is high. So if this is new to you and it sounds overwhelming, it's not overwhelming. It's just a different way of looking at your blood work. Your blood work is so valuable, and it is not given the attention that it deserves when someone is just scanning through and they're just looking for high and low markers. Because when you go to different labs to get your blood run, you can go to whatever, like around here we have like Quest Diagnostics, and there's all these different labs. Well, they all have different normal high and low markers, which is crazy to me because it's not standardized. So you can go state to state, you can go lab to lab, you can be healthier in one lab than you are in the other lab. So it's crazy when you think about it that way, because it's kind of irresponsible. We don't tried and true standardized way of measuring what is normal, because what is normal is actually not healthy. It's just common. So when they're looking at your blood range and they're saying you got a high marker or a low marker, they're comparing you to the average population. So the average population, generally speaking, are not hanging out in optimal health. They're walking around with a lot of complicated issues, and so that becomes the range in which you are being compared against. And if we want to heal, if we want to get healthier and reach our health and wellness goals and get rid of our symptoms and start to feel amazing and vibrant, we can't compare ourselves to other sick people. We want to compare ourselves to optimal functional ranges, which are compared to optimal functional health. So the functional ranges that I use are standardized. You meet with me in, I live in Pennsylvania, or you go to a functional medicine practitioner in California. We're going to be using pretty much the same ranges. So that's pretty cool, because that's standardized. That's more responsible to me. And we're also trained in a certain way to look at the blood work and identify patterns, so that there's more of this outlook of preventing chronic illnesses down the road, instead of just going in and looking for those high or low markers, which identifies just the pathology. And traditionally speaking, when pathology is identified, there's usually a prescription medication that is tied to that pathology, and that's kind of your mode of healing. So with the approach that I use is I go in and I look at all these patterns, and I look and identify the root cause of what is causing you to have these symptoms. Then we start the repair protocol, and then we layer on the nourishment protocol. But the data from the blood work is so, so, so important. So I went through I've been on here for 15 minutes kind of sharing with you the entire list of recommendations that I would get from the medical doctor. And I want to leave you with this one note. So a lot of traditional doctors, endocrinologists, will be a little bit intimidated. They'll be like, where did you get this list? Why should I test this stuff? Because not to share too much of my own, health history in this particular Facebook Live, but they thought I was like super healthy and all my symptoms were in my head. And I was actually recommended to go talk to somebody about it because they thought I was making all of it up. And I hear this time and time again, where you'll get a little bit of pushback when you go in with a list and, you have the CMP and the the comprehensive metabolic panel, and you have the complete blood count, and you're asking for the lipids and the full thyroid panel and the iron panel, and, all those additional markers. The doctors are thinking, well, I'm not going to test all this because I have to justify to this insurance company why I am testing all this stuff. And I think she's perfectly healthy, so I'm not going to test all of it. And maybe they'll take like a few and test them. And I see that a lot, where my clients will go with a full list of blood work, and they'll be like, but I only got this much. And I'm like, well, let's, use what you have. We can still make sense of what you have. So I do want to say that if you don't come back and you don't have all of this stuff, we can still work with a lot of it. We can still work with a lot of the traditionally run panels, but just reinstate to that doctor that you have been dealing with X, Y, and Z symptoms for, this many years. You've not gotten answers. It's not in your head. And, sometimes you have to play a little bit of that hard card where you're like, if you can't help me with this, remember that they work for you. You might have to say, I might need to go somewhere else, and, be as polite as possible, because they are there to help you, but they are not trained in the way that I'm trained. So they don't see the value and benefit of having all of these tests run, especially the full thyroid panel. So I actually had one client recently who requested a full thyroid panel from an endocrinologist. And when we got down to some of like the reverse T3 and some of the antibodies, the endocrinologist said, I can't read these for you. Do you have someone who can help you out to, decipher these? And if you do, I'll go ahead and test them, but I don't know what to do with these tests. And so I'm like, this is a traditionally trained endocrinologist, here in the United States. And I had my client request a full thyroid panel, and the endocrinologist, bless her heart, actually admitted that she didn't know what to do with those markers, and that she would have to get her interpretation from somewhere else, which was fine because the woman was working with me. So we interpreted them. But if you do get that pushback, just kind of reinstate that, this is important to you. You've been dealing with X, Y, and Z symptoms for a long time, and you haven't gotten any answers, and you want to get better. And you know that these lab results and markers will help to give you answers. And just kind of, be polite, but also stand your ground. And you'll find that you'll enter a conversation with them, and most times they will go ahead and order more than what they originally would have. So I think what I'll do is end up putting this video into your membership site, because it is a 20-minute video. This becomes a masterclass at this point, and I'm going to create a PDF, a printable for you, that has some of the information that I went over. So if you're currently like taking notes on a napkin, you won't have to take the napkin into your doctor. You could take a recommended list of blood work in, and I can write it up for you so that you have something a little bit more concrete to go by. So I will include that and put that in the membership site for you so that you have it as a resource. So as you can see, my answer was lengthy. And if you don't feel like you need all of that blood work, you don't have to request it. If you have any more questions or need some clarity on some of the blood work that I recommended, go ahead and ask me in the comments. Just make sure you tag me so that I can see it. So I'm going to go ahead and head off because we have a new member call here in 20 minutes, and I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of new members and getting to know you. And I will check in and talk to you guys soon. Hope you have a good day. Bye.